Speaker, and I address Part 3 on public order, having joined the Democracy, Constitution APPG inquiry, which reported on this part of the bill last week. And that's in the context of the March events at Clapham Common and Bristol. What we found was not just a lack of justification for many of these proposed new powers, but of equal concern, a lack of understanding of the current law amongst the relevant police. On the Clapham Common vigil, everyone, including the local police, knew this was going to happen in every event. Yet the local activist organisers were not only ultimately ignored, but threatened with prosecution. So what should have been a quiet, well-organised vigil for a slain innocent woman became an increasingly disorganised public order situation with police using extreme repressive techniques. As a result, public safety at this event was diminished, firstly as a result of police omission to engage in advance, and then secondly, due to their lack of preparedness, engagement, intelligence, and finally overreaction on the day, which is why the bill ought to set out the basic human rights position along the lines set out in new clause 29.
Will my honourable friend allow me?
I will.
My honourable friend is extremely kind. Will he agree with me that much of what we sadly saw at Clapham Common at the vigil was in consequence of sloppily drafted COVID regulations, which were given such little scrutiny by this House, let alone understood by the police who we compelled to enforce them?
Exactly.
I thank my honourable friend, because if I'd had 5 minutes, that was exactly the case I was going to make. And that was proven in our inquiry. Sadly, time today only allows me to give one example of concern on these new public order powers. And I look at clause 54, providing powers to deal with non-violent serious disruption. And firstly, this should be stated in this bill, not in secondary legislation. Furthermore, I'm concerned that this would provide excessive powers to prevent non-violent disruption to business in circumstances where the business concerned need not be the focus of the protest. Again, this shifts the ground towards making a presumption of illegality. In practice, working out to what extent a business can be disrupted is only going to make the police's job tougher, not easier, and certainly more political in nature. For instance, if protest that has until now been kept away from residential areas is in future going to be removed also from business areas, where does protest go? Presumably to a place where it can't be heard. But noise and disruption, as has been said, are integral to protest. And as many commentators have pointed out, what will happen in practice is the police being put increasingly into a position of receiving pressure from businesses to condition and pressure from demonstrators who will then go ahead anyway, as they did at Clapham Common and as they did in Bristol. So this clause could well undermine public confidence in the police and reduce public safety. This is why our inquiry recommended guidance being produced to help both police and organisers understand their respective powers and obligations, and that's new clause 85. But more fundamentally, we also need to question whether it is still appropriate that police both condition protest and then also enforce their own conditions. To that extent, I am drawn to something like the Northern Ireland Parades Commission, which has power to place conditions on public processions, thus leaving the police with the enforcement role that they know how to do so well.